Right, Dad. It's a Daenerys one, I'm sorry. Uh, what a shame. I love you, by the way. I hope you're doing well. I miss you a lot. Um, I hope you've got some nice things to watch, and you'll listen to some of these, obviously, but if you're listening to me now. But, yeah, I hope you're okay. Can't wait to see you. But, I'll just rush it because it's a bad chapter. I'm not going to lie to you, Dad, and I'm sorry. And the next one's not good either. But I'll read it. So it's Daenerys. Across the still blue water came the slow, steady beat of drums, and the soft swish of oars from the galleys. The great cog groaned in their wake, the heavy lines stretched taut between them. Valerian sails hung limp, drooping forlorn from the masts. Yet even so, as she stood upon the forecastle, watching her dragons chase each other across a cloudless blue sky, Daenerys Targaryen was as happy as she could ever remember being. Her Dothraki called the sea the poison water, distrusting any liquid that their horses could not drink. On the day the three ships had lifted anchor at Karth, you would have thought they were sailing to hell instead of Pentos. Her brave young blood riders had stared off at the dwindling coastline with huge white eyes, each of the three determined to show no fear before the other two, while her handmaids, Iri and Jiggy, clutched the rail desperately and wrenched over the side at every little swell. The rest of Dany's tiny Khalasar remained below decks, preferring the company of their nervous horses to the terrified landless world about the ships. Terrifying. When a sudden squall had enveloped them 6 days into the voyage, she heard them through the hatches, the horses kicking and screaming, the riders praying in thin, quavery voices each time Balerion heaved or swayed. No squall could frighten Dany, though. Daenerys Stormborn she was called, for she had come howling into the world on distant Dragonstone as the greatest storm in the memory of Westeros howled outside. A storm so fierce that it ripped gargoyles from the castle walls and smashed her father's fleet to kindling. The narrow sea was often stormy, and Dany had crossed it 100 times as a girl, running from one free city to the next, half a step ahead of the usurper's hired knives. She loved the sea. She liked the sharp, salty smell of the air, and the vastness of horizons bounded only by a vault of azure sky above. It made her feel small, but free as well. She liked the dolphins that sometimes swam along beside Balerion, slicing through the waves like silvery spears, and the flying fish they glimpsed now and again. She even liked the sailors, with all their songs and stories. Once, on a voyage to Bravos, as she'd watched the crew wrestle down a great green sail in a rising gale, she'd even thought how fine it would be to be a sailor. But when she told her brother Viserys, he'd twisted her hair until she cried. "You are blood of the dragon," he had screamed at her. "And a dragon. No, a dragon, not some smelly fish," he'd said. He was a fool about that, and so much else, Dany thought. If he'd been wiser and more patient, it would be him sailing west to take the throne that was his by rights. Viserys had been stupid and vicious, she had come to realize, yet sometimes she missed him all the same. Not the cruel man he had become by the end, but the brother who had sometimes let her creep into his bed, the boy who told her tales of the 7 kingdoms, and talked of how much better their lives would be once he claimed his crown. The captain appeared at her elbow. "Would that this Balerion could soar as your namesake did, your grace," he said in bastard Valyrian, heavily flavoured with accents of Pentos. "Then we should not need to row, nor tow, nor pray for wind." "Just so, Captain," she answered with a smile, pleased to have won the man over. Captain Grolier was an old Pentoshi like his master, Illyrio Mapatis, and he had been nervous as a maiden about carrying 3 dragons on his ship. 100 buckets of seawater still hung from the gunwales in case of fires. At first, Grolier had wanted the dragons caged, and Danny had consented to put his fears at ease. But their misery was so palpable that she soon changed her mind and insisted they be freed. Even Captain Grolier was glad of that now. There'd been one small fire, easily extinguished. Against that, Balerion suddenly seemed to have far fewer rats than she'd had before, when she sailed under the name Sanduleon. And her crew, once as fearful as they were curious, had begun to take a queer fierce pride in their dragons. Every man of them, from captain to cook's boy, loved to watch the 3 fly, though none so much as Danny. They are my children, she told herself, and if the Magi spoke truly, they are the only children I am ever to have. Viserion scales were the colour of flesh cream, with his horns, wing bones, and spinal crest a dark gold that flashed bright as metal in the sun. Rhaegar was made of the green of summer and the bronze of fall. They soared above the ships in wide circles, higher and higher, each trying to climb above the other. Dragons always preferred to attack from above, Danny had learned. Should either get between the other and the sun, he would fold his wings and dive screaming, and they would tumble from the sky locked together in a tangled scaly ball, jaws snapping and tails lashing. The first time they'd done it, she feared they meant to kill each other, but it was only sport. No sooner would they splash into the sea than they would break apart and rise again, shrieking and hissing. Drogon was aloft as well, though not in sight. He would be miles ahead or miles behind, hunting. He was always hungry, her Drogon. Hungry and growing fast. Another year, or perhaps 2, and he may be large enough to ride. Then I shall have no need of ships to cross the great salt sea. But that time was not come yet come. Rhaegar and Viserion, bloody hell, were the size of small dogs, Drogon only a little larger, and any dog would have outweighed them. They were all wings and neck and tail, lighter than they looked, and so Daenerys Targaryen must rely on wood and wind and canvas to bear her home. The wood and the canvas had served her well enough so far, but the fickle wind had turned traitor. For 6 days and 6 nights they had been becalmed, and now a 7th had come, and still no breath of air to fill their sails. Fortunately, 2 of the ships that Magister Illyrio had sent after her were trading galleys, with 200 oars apiece, and crews of strong-armed oarsmen to row them. But the great cog Balerion was a song of a different key, a ponderous, broad-beamed sow of a ship, with immense holds and huge sails, but helpless in a calm. Vargar and Meraxes had let out lines to tow her, but it made for painfully slow going. All 3 ships were crowded and heavily laden. "I cannot see Drogon," said Sir Jorah Mormont as he joined her on the forecastle. "Is he lost again?" "We are the ones who are lost, sir. Drogon has no taste for the wet creeping, no more than I do." Bolder than the other 2, her black dragon had been the first to try his wings above the water, the first to flutter from ship to ship, the first to lose himself in a passing cloud, and the first to kill. The flying fish no sooner broke the surface of the water than they were enveloped in a lance of flame, snatched up and swallowed. "How big will he grow?" Danny asked curiously. "Do you know?" "In the 7 kingdoms there are tales of dragons who grew so huge that they could pluck giant cravens from the seas." Danny laughed. "That would be a wondrous sight to see." "It is only a tale, Khaleesi," said her exile knight. "They talk of wise old dragons living 1,000 years as well." "Well, how long does a dragon live?" She looked up as Viserion swooped low over the ship, his wings beating slowly and stirring the limp sails. Sir Jorah shrugged. A dragon's natural span of days is many times as long as a man's, or so the songs would have us believe. But the dragons of the Seven Kingdoms knew best were those of House Targaryen. They were bred for war, and in war they died. It's not so easy a thing to slay a dragon, but it can be done, Khaleesi. The squire, Whitebeard, standing by the figurehead, with one lean hand curled about his tall hardwood staff, turned toward them and said, Balerion the Black Dread was 200 years old when he died during the reign of Jaehaerys the Conciliator. Conciliator? I don't know. He was so large he could swallow an oryx whole. A dragon never stops growing, your grace, so long as he has food and freedom. His name was Arston, but strong Belwas called him Whitebeard. They had named him Whitebeard for his pale whiskers, and most everyone called him that now. He was taller than Sir Jorah, though not so muscular. His eyes were a pale blue, his long beard as white as snow and as fine as silk. Freedom? Asked Dany, curious. What do you mean? In King's Landing, your ancestors raised an immense domed castle for their dragons. The Dragon Pit it is called. It still stands atop the hill of Rhaenys, though all in ruins now. That was where the royal dragons dwelt in days of yore, and a cavernous dwelling it was, with iron doors so wide that 30 knights could ride through them abreast. Yet even so, it was noted that none of the pit dragons ever reached the size of their ancestors. The maesters say it was because of the walls around them, and the great dome above their heads. If walls could keep us small, peasants would all be tiny and kings large as giants, said Sir Jorah. I've seen huge men born on hovels, and dwarves who dwelt in castles. Men are men, Whitebeard replied. Dragons are dragons. Sir Jorah snorted in his disdain. How profound. The exiled knight had no love for the old man. He'd made that plain from the first. What do you know of dragons, anyway? Little enough, that's true. Yet I served for a time in King's Landing in the days when King Aerys sat the throne, and walked beneath the dragon skulls that looked down from the walls of his throne room. Viserys talked of those skulls, said Dany. The usurper took them down and hid them away. He could not bear them looking down on him upon his stolen throne. She beckoned Whitebeard closer. Did you ever meet my royal father? King Aerys the second had died before his daughter was born. I had that great honour, your grace. Did you find him good and gentle? Whitebeard did his best to hide his feelings, but they were there, plain on his face. His grace was often pleasant. Often, Dany smiled, but not always. He could be very harsh to those he thought his enemies. A wise man never makes an enemy of a king, said Dany. Did you know my brother Rhaegar as well? It was said that no man ever knew Prince Rhaegar. Truly, I had the privilege of seeing him in tourney, though, and often heard him play his harp and its silver strings. Sir Jorah snorted, along with 1,000 others at some harvest feast. Next you'll claim you squired for him. I'll make no such claim, sir. Miles Mooton was Prince Rhaegar's squire. My jaw is sounding a bit like Littlefingers there. And Richmond Longmouth after him. When they won their spurs, he knighted them himself, and they remained his close companions. Young Lord Connington was dear to the prince as well, but his oldest friend was Arthur Dane. The sword of the morning, said Dany, delighted. Viserys used to talk about his wondrous white blade. He said Arthur was the only knight in the realm who was our brother's peer. Whitebeard bowed his head. It is not my place to question the words of Prince Viserys. King, Dany corrected. He was a king, though he never reigned. Viserys, the third of his name. But what do you mean? His answer had not been one that she'd expected. Sir Jorah named Rhaegar the last dragon once. He had to have been a peerless warrior to be called that, surely. Your Grace, said Whitebeard, the Prince of Dragonstone was a most puissant, I think, warrior, but go on, she urged. You may speak freely to me, as you command. The old man leaned upon his hardwood staff. His brow furrowed. A warrior without peer. Those are fine words, your Grace, but words win no battles. Swords win battles, Sir Jorah said bluntly, and Prince Rhaegar knew how to use one. He did, sir, but I've seen 100 tournaments and more wars than I would wish, and however strong or fast or skilled the knight may be, there are others who can match him. A man will win one tourney and fall quickly in the next. A slick spot in the grass may mean defeat, or what you ate for supper the night before. A change in the wind may bring the gift of victory. He glanced at Sir Jorah, or a lady's favour knotted round an arm. Mormont's face darkened. Be careful what you say, old man. Oh God, I know my Jorah was never good, so that's not a surprise. Arstan had seen Sir Jorah fight at Lannisport, Dany knew. In the tourney, Mormont had won with a lady's favour knotted round his arm. He'd won the lady too, Lynice of House Hightower, his second wife, highborn and beautiful. But she'd ruined him and abandoned him, and the memory of her was bitter to him now. Be gentle, my knight. She put a hand on Jorah's arm. Arstan had no wish to give offence, I'm certain. As you say, Khaleesi. Sir Jorah's voice was grudging. Dany turned back to the squire. I know little of Rhaegar. Only the tales Viserys told, and he was a little boy when our brother died. What was he truly like? The old man considered a moment. Able, that above all. Determined, deliberate, dutiful, and single-minded. There is a tale told of him, but doubtless Sir Jorah knows it as well. I would hear it from you. As you wish, said Whitebeard. As a young boy, the Prince of Dragonstone was bookish to a fault. He was reading so early that men said Queen Rhaella must have swallowed some books and a candle whilst he was in her womb. Rhaegar took no interest in the play of other children. The maesters were awed by his wits, but his father's knights would jest sourly that Baelor the Blessed had been born again. Until one day Prince Rhaegar found something in his scrolls that changed him. No one knows what it might have been, only that the boy suddenly appeared early one morning in the yard as the knights were donning their steel. He walked up to Sir Wellem Darry, the master-at-arms, and said, I will require sword and armour. It seems I must be a warrior. And he was, said Dany, delighted. He was indeed. Whitebeard bowed. My pardons, your grace. We speak of warriors, and I see that strong Belwas has arisen. I must attend him. Dany glanced aft. The eunuch was climbing through the hold amidships, nimble for all his size. Belwas was squat but broad, a good 15 stone of fattened muscle, his great brown gut crisscrossed by faded white scars. He wore baggy pants, a yellow silk belly band, and an absurdly tiny leather vest dotted with iron studs. Strong Belwas is hungry, he roared at everyone, and no one in particular. Strong Belwas will eat now. Turning, he spied Arstan on the forecastle. Whitebeard, you will bring food for strong Belwas? You may go, Dany told the squire. He bowed again and moved off to tend the needs of the man he served. Sir Jorah watched with a frown on his blunt, honest face. Mormont was big and burly, strong of jaw and thick of shoulder. Not a handsome man by any means, but as true a friend as Dany had ever known. You'd be wise to take that old man's words well salted, he told her when Whitebeard was out of earshot. A queen must listen to all, she reminded him. The highborn and the low, and the strong and the weak, the noble and the venal. Venal? I don't know. One voice may speak you false, but in many there is always truth to be found. She'd read that in a book. Hear my voice then, your grace, the exile said. This Aston Whitebeard is playing you false. He is too old to be a squire, and too well spoken to have been serving that oaf of a eunuch. That does seem queer, Danny had to admit. Strong Belwas was an ex-slave, bred and trained in the fighting pits of Marine. Magister Illyria had sent him to guard her, or so Belwas claimed, and it was true that she needed guarding. The usurper on his iron throne had offered land and lordship to any man who killed her. One attempt had been made already, with a cup of poisoned wine. The closer she came to Westeros, the more likely another attack became. Back in Carth, the warlock Pyat Pri had sent a sorrowful man after her to avenge the undying she'd burned in the House of Dust. Warlocks never forgot a wrong, it was said, and the sorrowful men never failed to kill. Most of the Dothraki would be against her as well. Khal Drogo's Coes led Khalasar to their own now, and none of them would hesitate to attack her own little band on sight, to slay and slave her people and drag Dany herself back to Vaes Dothrak, to take her proper place among the withered crones of the Dosh Khaleen. She hoped that Zao's own Doxos was not her enemy, but the Carthene merchant had coveted her dragons. And there was Quaithe of the Shadow, that strange woman in the red lacquer mask, with all her crooked counsel. Was she an enemy too, or only a dangerous friend? Dany could not say. Ser Jorah saved me from the poisoner, and Aston Whitebeard from the manticore. Perhaps strong Belwas will save me from the next. He was huge enough, with arms like small trees and a curved arc so sharp he might have shaved with it, in the unlikely event of hair sprouting on those smooth brown cheeks. Yet he was childlike as well. As a protector he leaves much to be desired. Thankfully I have Ser Jorah and my blood riders, and my dragons never forget. In time the dragons would be her most formidable guardians, just as they had been for Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters 300 years ago. Just now, though, they brought her more danger than protection. In all the world there were but 3 living dragons, and those were hers. They were a wonder, and a terror, and beyond price. She was pondering her next words when she felt a cool breath on the back of her head, and a loose strand of her gold hair stirred against her brow. Above, the canvas creaked and moved, her next words I meant earlier, and suddenly a great cry went up from all over Balerion. "Wind!" the sailors shouted. "The wind returns!" Dany looked up to where the great cog's sails rippled and belled as the lines thrummed and tightened, and sang the sweet song they had missed so for 6 long days. Captain Grolier rushed aft, shouting commands. The Pentoshi was scrambling up the masts, those that were not cheering. Even strong Belwas let out a great bellow and did a little dance. "The gods are good," Dany said. "You see, Jorah, we are on our way once more." "Yes," he said, "but to what, my queen?" All day the wind blew, steady from the east at first, and then in wild gusts. The sun set in a blaze of red. I was still half a world from Westeros, Dany reminded herself, but every hour brings me closer. She tried to imagine what it would feel like when she first caught sight of the land she was born to rule. It will be as fair a shore as I have ever seen, I know it. How could it be otherwise? But later that night, as Balerion plunged onward through the dark, and Dany sat cross-legged on her bunk in the captain's cabin, feeding her dragons. "Even upon the sea," Grolier had said so graciously. Oh, that was poor. "Queens take precedence over captains." A sharp knock came upon the door. Irri had been sleeping at the foot of her bunk. It was too narrow for 3, and tonight was Jicky's turn to share the soft feather bed with her Khaleesi. But the handmaid roused at the knock and went to the door. Dany pulled up a coverlet and tucked it under her arms. She was naked and had not expected a caller at this hour. "Come," she said when she saw Sir Jorah standing without, beneath a swaying lantern. The exiled knight ducked his head as he entered. "Your Grace, I am sorry to disturb your sleep." "I was not sleeping, sir. Come and watch." She took a chunk of salt pork out of the bowl in her lap and held it up for her dragons to see. All 3 of them eyed it hungrily. Rhaegal spread green wings and stirred the air, and Viserion's neck swayed back and forth like a long pale snake's as he followed the movement of her hand. "Drogon," Dany said softly. "Dracarys," and she tossed the pork in the air. Drogon moved quicker than a striking cobra. Flame roared from his mouth, orange and scarlet and black, searing the meat before it began to fall. As his sharp black teeth snapped shut around it, Rhaegal's head darted close, as if to steal the prize from his brother's jaws. But Drogon swallowed and screamed, and the smaller green dragon could only hiss in frustration. "Stop that, Rhaegal," Dany said in annoyance, giving his head a swat. "You had the last one. I'll have no greedy dragons." She smiled at Sir Jorah. "I won't need to char their meat over a brazier any longer." "So I see. Dracarys." All 3 dragons turned their heads at the sound of that word, and Viserion let loose with a blast of pale gold flame that made Sir Jorah take a hasty step backward. Dany giggled. "Be careful with that word, sir, or they like to singe your beard off. It means dragonfire in High Valyrian. I wanted to choose a command that no one was like to utter by chances." Mormont nodded. "Your Grace," he said, "I wonder if I might have a few private words." "Of course. Irri, leave us for a bit." She put a hand on Jicky's bare shoulder and shook the other handmaid awake. "You as well, sweetling. Sir Jorah needs to talk to me." "Yes, Khaleesi." Jicky tumbled from the bunk, naked and yawning. Her thick black hair tumbled about her head. She dressed quickly and left with Irri, closing the door behind them. Dany gave the dragons the rest of the salt pork to squabble over, and patted the bed beside her. "Sit, good sir, and tell me what is troubling you." "3 things." Sir Jorah sat, strong Belwas, this Arston Whitebeard, and Illyrio Mopatis, who sent them. "Again?" Dany pulled the coverlet higher and tugged one end over her shoulder. I thought it said hand. I was confused. And why is that?" "The warlocks in Kar told you that you would be betrayed 3 times." The exile knight reminded her, as Viserion and Rhaegal began to snap and claw at each other. Once for blood, and once for gold, and once for love." Dany was not like to forget. "Mirri Maz Duur was the first." "Which means 2 traitors yet remain. And now these 2 appear. I find that troubling. Yes. Never forget Robert offered a lordship to the man who slays you." Dany leaned forward and yanked Viserion's tail to pull him off his green brother. Her blanket fell away from her chest as she moved. She grabbed it hastily and covered herself again. "The usurper is dead," she said. "Mother is here."
"Mother is here. Hello, my darling boy."
"Oh dear."
Are you nicely relaxed now listening to your beautifully spoken son? I'm off to do a little bit more washing up. I'm a bit obsessed at the moment.
Okay.
Love you, bye.
But his son rules in his place. Sir Jorah lifted his gaze, and his dark eyes met her own. "A dutiful son pays his father's debts, even blood debts. This boy Joffrey might want me dead. If he recalls that I'm alive, What has that to do with Belwas and Aston Whitebeard? The old man does not even wear a sword. You've seen that. Aye. And I've even seen how even seen how deftly he handles that staff of his. Recall how he killed that manticore in Carth. It might as easily have been your throat he crushed. Might have been, but was not, she pointed out. It was a stinging manticore meant to slay me. He saved my life. Khaleesi, has it occurred to you that Aston Whitebeard and Belwas might have been in league with the assassin? It might all have been a ploy to win your trust. Her sudden laughter made Drogon hiss and sent Viserion flapping to his perch above the porthole. The ploy worked well. The exile knight did not return his smile. These are Illyrio's ships, Illyrio's captains, Illyrio's sailors, and strong Belwas and Aston Whitebeard are his men as well, not yours. Magister Illyrio has protected me in the past. Strong Belwas says that he wept when he heard my brother was dead. Yes, said Mormont, but did he weep for Viserys or the plan? Oh no, for the plans he had made with him. His plans need not change. Magister Illyrio is a friend to House Targaryen and wealthy. He was not born wealthy. In the world as I've seen it, no man grows rich by kindness. The warlock said the second treason would be for gold. What does Illyrio Mopatis love more than gold? His skin. Across the cabin, Drogon stirred restlessly, steam rising from his snout. Mary Masdur betrayed me. I burnt her for it. Mary Masdur was in your power, in Pentos. You shall be in Illyrio's power. No, in Pentos you should be in Illyrio's. Sorry. It is not the same. I know the Magister as well as you. He is a devious man and clever. I need clever men about me if I am to win the Iron Throne. Ser Jorah snorted. That wine seller who tried to poison you was a clever man as well. Clever men hatch ambitious schemes. Dany drew her legs up beneath the blanket. You will protect me. You and my blood riders. 4 men, Khaleesi. You believe you know Illyrio Mopatis very well, yet you insist on surrounding yourself with men who you do not know. Like this puffed-up eunuch and the world's oldest squire. Take a lesson from Pyat Pri and Zarazor and Daxos. He means well, Dany reminded herself. He does all he does for love. It seems to me that a queen who trusts no one is as foolish as a queen who trusts everyone. Every man I take into my service is a risk. I understand that. But how am I to win the 7 kingdoms without such risks? Am I to conquer Westeros with 1 exile knight and 3 Dothraki blood riders? His jaw said stubbornly, Your path is dangerous. I will not deny that. But if you blindly trust in every liar and schemer who crosses it, you will end as your brothers did. His obstinacy made her angry. He treats me like some child. Strong Belwas could not scheme his way to breakfast. And what lies has Aston Whitebeard told me? He is not what he pretends to be, my grace. No, your grace. He speaks to you more boldly than any squire would dare. He spoke frankly at my command. He knew my brother. A great many men knew your brother. Your grace is in Westeros, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard sits on the small council and serves the king with his wits as well as his steel. If I am the first of your Queensguard, I pray you hear me out. I have a plan to put to you. What plan? Tell me. Illyrio Mopatis wants you back in Pentos under his roof. Very well, go to him. But in your own time and not alone. Let us see how loyal and obedient these new subjects of yours truly are. Command Grolio to change course for Slaver's Bay. Dany was not certain she liked the sound of that at all. Everything she'd ever heard of the flesh marts in the great slave cities of Yunkai, Marine and Astapor was dire and frightening. What is there for me at Slaver's Bay? In an army, said Ser Jorah. If Strong Belwas is so much to your liking, you can buy hundreds more like him out of the fighting pits of Marine. But it is Astapor I'd set my sails for. In Astapor you can buy unsullied. the slaves in the spiked bronze hats. Danny had seen unsullied guards in the free cities, posted at the gates of magisters, archons, and dynasts. I don't know. Why should I want unsullied? They don't even ride horses, and most of them are fat. The unsullied you may have seen in Pentos and Mere were household guards and soft service, and eunuchs tend to plumpness in any case. Food is the only vice allowed them. To judge all unsullied by a few household guards is like judging all squires by Austin Whitebeard, your grace. Do you know the tale of the 3,000 of Cohor? No. The coverlet slipped off Danny's shoulder, and she tucked it back into place. It was 400 years ago or more, when the Dothraki first rode out to the east, sacking and burning every town and city in their path. The Carl who led them was named Temel. His Khalasar was not so big as Drogo's, but it was big enough. 50,000 at the least. Half of them braided warriors with bells ringing in their hair. The Cohoric knew he was coming. They strengthened their walls, doubled the size of their own guard, and hired 2 free companies besides. The Bright Banners and the Second Sons. And almost as an afterthought, they sent a man to Astapor to buy 3,000 unsullied. It was a long march back to Cohor, however, and as they approached, they saw the smoke and dust and heard the distant din of battle. By the time the unsullied reached the city, the sun had set. Crows and wolves were feasting beneath the walls on what remained of the Cohoric heavy horse. The Bright Banners and Second Sons had fled, as sellswords are wont to do in the face of hopeless odds. With dark falling, the Dothraki had retired to their own camps to drink and dance and feast, but none had doubted that they would return on the morrow, to smash the city gates, storm the walls, and rape, loot, and slave as they pleased. But when dawn broke and Temo and his blood riders led their Khalasar out of the camp, they found 3,000 unsullied, drawn up before the gates with the black goat standard flying over their heads. So small a force could easily have been flanked. But do you know Dothraki? These were men on foot, and men on foot are fit only to be ridden down. The Dothraki charged. The unsullied locked their shields, lowered their spears, and stood firm. Against 20,000 schemers with bells in their hair, they stood firm. 18 times the Dothraki charged, and broke themselves on those shields and spears like waves on a rocky shore. Thrice Temo sent his archers wheeling past, and arrows fell like rain upon the 3,000. But the unsullied merely lifted their shields above their heads until the squall had passed. In the end, only 600 of them remained, but more than 12,000 Dothraki lay dead upon the field, including Karl Temo, his blood riders, his cohors, and all his sons. On the morning of the 4th day, the new Karl led the survivors past the city gates in a stately procession. One by one, each man cut off his braid and threw it down before the feet of the 3,000. Since that day, the city guards of Cohor had been made up solely of unsullied, every one of whom carries a tall spear from which hangs a braid of human hair. That is what you will find in Astapor, Khaleesi. Put ashore there, and continue on to Pentos overland. It will take longer, yes, but when you break bread with Magister Illyrio, you will have 1,000 swords behind you, not just 4. There is wisdom in this, yes, Danny thought, but how am I to buy 1,000 slave soldiers? All I have of value is the crown the Tourmaline Brotherhood gave me. Dragons will not be as great a wonder in Astapor as they were in Karth. It may be that the slavers will shower you with gifts as the Kartheen did. If not, these ships carry more than your Dothraki in their horses. They took on trade goods at Karth. I've been through the holds and seen for myself. Bolts of silk and bales of tiger skin, amber and jade carvings, saffron myrrh. Saffron myrrh. Slaves are cheap, your grace. Tiger skins are costly. Those are Illyrio's tiger skins, she objected. And Illyrio is a friend to Illyrio was a friend to House Targaryen. No, what? Hold on. Yeah. Yeah, and Illyria is a friend to House Targaryen. All the more reason not to steal his goods. What use are wealthy friends if they will not put their wealth at your disposal, my queen? If Magister Illyria would deny you, he is only Zauzo and Daxos with 4 chins. And if he is sincere in his devotion to your cause, he will not begrudge you 3 shiploads of trade goods. What better use for his tiger skins than to buy you the beginnings of an army? That's true. Danny felt a rising excitement. There will be dangers on such a long march. There are dangers at sea as well, Khaleesi. Corsairs, I don't know. And pirates hunt the southern route, and north of Valyria the smoking sea is demon-haunted. The next storm could sink or scatter us. A kraken could pull us under, or we might find ourselves becalmed again, and die of thirst as we wait for the wind to rise. A march will have different dangers, my queen, but none greater. What if Captain Grolier refuses to change course, though? And Arston, Strong Belwas, what will they do? Sir Jorah stood. Perhaps it's time you found that out. Yes, she decided. I'll do it. Danny threw back the coverlids and hopped from the bunk. I'll see the captain at once. Command him to set course for Astapor. She bent over her chest, threw open the lid, and seized the first garment to hand, a pair of loose sand-silk trousers. Hand me my medallion belt, she commanded Jorah, as she pulled the sandsilk up over her hips. And my vest. She started to say, turning. Sir Jorah slid his arms around her. Oh, was all Danny had time to say, as he pulled her close and pressed his lips down on hers. He smelled of sweat and salt and leather, and the iron studs on his jerkin dug into her naked breasts as he crushed her hard against him. One hand held her by the shoulder, whilst the other slid down her spine to the small of her back, and her mouth opened for his tongue, though she never told it to. His beard is scratchy, she thought, but his mouth is sweet. The Dothraki wore no beards, only long moustaches, and only Khal Drogo had ever kissed her before. He should not be doing this. I am his queen, not his woman. It was a long kiss, though how long Danny could not have said. When it ended, Sir Jorah let go of her, and she took a quick step backward. You should not have... I should not have waited so long, he finished for her. I should have kissed you in Karth, in Vaes Loro. I should have kissed you in the Red Waste every night and every day. You were made to be kissed often and well. His eyes were on her breasts. Danny covered them with her hands before her nipples could betray her. That was not fitting. I am your queen. My queen, he said, and the bravest, sweetest, and most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Daenerys, your grace, he conceded. The dragon has 3 heads, remember. You have wondered at that ever since you heard it from the warlocks in the House of Dust. Well, here's your meaning, Balerion, Meraxes, and Vargar, ridden by Aegon, Rhaenys, and Visenya. The 3-headed dragon of House Targaryen. 3 dragons and 3 riders. Yes, said Danny, but my brothers are dead. Rhaenys and Visenya were Aegon's wives as well as his sisters. You have no brothers, but you can take husbands. I tell you truly, Daenerys, there is no man in all the world who will ever be half so true to you as me. And that's it. Not much really happens in that. I don't like that chapter, it's just boring. I like Arston though. Arston's good. Jorah's a bit dodgy in the books, to be fair, because Daenerys is like a child. I mean, he's a bit old in the programme, but at least she's an adult. Oh well, that's that. I'm going to definitely do another one today because I want to get Bran out of the way. So, yeah. I don't know when it'll be uploaded, but I'll definitely be recording another one today. So yes, I hope you weren't too bored, and I love you very much. Yeah, love you. Bye.